Okay, so I want you to imagine a place that surrounds an isolated, mystical mountain. The mountain itself is a presence in this community. This is a place where the sky dominates the landscape from sunrise until sunset. A place where the sky is most often blue and the few gray days are graced by rainbows. Imagine a place where the trees come alive with their own personalities, stand sentinel as landmarks on the road. This tree from this direction is called Welcome to Jora. If you're coming from the other direction, it's called Welcome to Bunguli, because it's between the two towns. The trees are older and more massive than anything except the mountain. They can shelter all the children of the village. Imagine growing up in a tiny, tiny village that has at least one church and a mosque, where religion is a joyous celebration of color and the blessings of music and food. This is a place where most of the meetings are held outside. There's no electricity, so we wouldn't have to worry about all this. And I would say that every meeting opens and closes with a prayer. Everyone rides bicycles or walks from town to town. This is a place where the look of the mountain changes as you walk from one place to another. This is a place where flowers are abundant, bright and beautiful, fragile and unusual, widely varied, and often short-lived. Except for these flowers, which only bloom when there's a drought. And so when there's a bad drought, these are the only things that bloom. Imagine growing up in a place where the people are beautiful and serene, unfailingly friendly and hospitable and happy. No matter how bad the second part of the slideshow looks, these are a very happy people. My spirit was at rest and happy when I was there. This is a place where everyone seems to smile easy and often, and the first word you learn as a young child is karibu, which means welcome. But it doesn't mean you're welcome like thank you, you're welcome. It means come into my home and share food and drink. It's a literal invitation to come in and share food and drink. And as a Westerner, the first time I went to someone's home, I probably ate as much as their whole family would eat for the whole rest of the day, or maybe 2 days, just because I didn't know any better. But it was fine. It was fine with them. It probably wasn't fine when they got hungry. But imagine that in every village around the mountain, there's a banda. This is a place where volunteers like me live temporarily. And the only non-African people you see as a young child are guests in your village. And in their language, the word for guest is the same as the word for stranger. So there is a concept. Imagine that your mothers and your sisters and your aunts belong to women's cooperatives. They get together a couple times a week to make pottery, weave beautiful baskets, socialize, and tell stories. Your world is full of color. The fibers of clothing and baskets, the colors of the traditional arts are reflected or reflect the colors in the natural world. Colors of animals, plants, and the artistry of everyday scenes will just knock your eyes out. This is just water collection. First of all, children have to know when there's enough water and when they need to collect it and store it. But when they store it, it looks like this. School equipment, tools, daily chores, everyday objects. It's just a beautiful place. It's very easy on the eyes. Imagine if you lived in a place where the red bricks of buildings were made directly from the earth, right in that spot, and used to build immediately buildings right there. And then they don't last forever, and when they're no longer useful, they just return directly to the ground. Imagine a place where your life is filled with insects. Singly, in huge colonies. This is a termite colony. They get to be as tall as these windows. Whoops. I'm getting ahead of myself. And in weirdly wonderful symbiosis with the trees. These thorny pods are full of minuscule little ants. And even though you'd think from the thorns that animals would not eat these little leaf shoots, they do. But as soon as there's a tremor, the ants just swarm out over the whole branch. And not only that, but they send like an odor, a signal, to the other trees. So they tell the other trees. So then the poor elephants and the giraffe can't eat. And young children know this. I mean, I had to learn it from a guide, but they grow up knowing this. Okay, this is a place where the most common birds are incredibly beautiful and unusual. Lots of people go to Africa for the birds. I didn't get that before I was there, but the birds just decorate the trees like a holiday. They walk around out in the open, bold. They're bold. They hunt from the treetops. They hide in the bush with camouflage. It's too bad about my other slideshow because I have a lot better wildlife photos than the one I put together last night. Imagine a place where fascinating creatures, large and small, are a part of your life. Small, larger, and larger yet. Imagine if your neighbors were noisy monkeys. And if animals made hidden pictures in the bush. Imagine if you lived near wildlife that doesn't exist anywhere else on Earth. The wildlife is, by turns, endearing. The giraffes are totally endearing. Entertaining. Elephants are incredibly entertaining. Interesting and cute. This place, this is Kasigao. So soak that up for just 5 seconds because we're running late. Okay, now imagine a place where it hasn't rained a drop in many, many months. I lived in Guatemala for a while, and the woman I lived with, whenever I would lick my finger and do that, she would say, muy fea. Very ugly. And so now whenever I do it, I think, how many people out there think of muy fea? Nobody until I said it. Okay, so it hasn't rained a drop in months. This is a place where thousands of hectares of hand-planted crops have failed, and at the very best are good for goat food. So it's a difficult decision when to make that decision to let your goats eat your corn plants. This is a place where the bush is so dry that a fire starts easily and spreads quickly and destroys acres and acres of bush habitat. Imagine a place where there's no running water. So people spend a lot of time carrying water from each village's single faucet. Children, after school, one of their regular jobs is to take water home on their way home from school. People from outside Castigao always wonder if the water's safe to drink. So they sent us with huge carboys of water. We used one, then the next one we weren't so careful about, and after about 2 weeks it got really old. The water comes straight out of the mountain. It was fine. I figured if there was something wrong with the water, everybody else would be sick too. Nobody was sick. Not from water. Imagine growing up in a place with no cars. So riding bicycles isn't so much fun when you have to carry heavy loads from place to place. Ditto for walking. This was John on the right. This was his first day of high school, and he had to walk a half hour to get there. I was helping, but I was taking photos, so. So imagine never seeing a car in your village. The only vehicles are these wheeled matatus. They're like little buses. They come through. They take probably 30, 35 people to the main highway. They're made for 14. They run on an irregular schedule. They come in the dark, though, and you can hear them hooting, they call it, tooting their horn in the dark. So they run from Castigao to the main road, where then to get there you have to ride for almost 2 hours, crowded into a van. And then when you get to the main highway, this is the highway from Mombasa to Nairobi. There aren't very many cars there either. They're mostly trucks and buses. The few cars there are usually pretty nice cars, and none of them belong to people in Castigao. Imagine the only private vehicles you see growing up are what the children in the village call open-air matatus. So it's like the buses, but they just carry volunteers from place to place. And they take eco-tourists out to the bush. So this is like what I did the first time I was there. Imagine growing up in villages without any paved streets, no gas stations, post offices, banks, parks, no movie theaters, no stores in some of the villages. But there are schools, always. There are some small shops in the larger villages, but there's no market for the pots and the baskets that the women's cooperatives produce. A hotel is a place that sells food, not a place where you stay. And Fort Jesus is the name of a town. It's another town. I thought Fort Jesus was kind of a oxymoron. Is that two things that don't go together? Yeah. So in hotels, in Castigao anyway, the menu is pretty much the same every day. Red beans and chapati, or chapati and red beans. And a full order is about 40 cents and a half order is a quarter. But people from out of town are the only people who really can afford to pay for food. So not many people can afford to eat out, but you do get to eat with your fingers even in public. So that's cool for kids. Imagine growing up in a place where there's no electricity. This isn't a very good photo, but this is the solar electricity kit in the volunteers' banda. And only the bandas have solar power. So the shops in your village only sell really basic dry goods because there's no refrigeration. Cold drinks are like drinks that they keep in the shade instead of hot drinks where they heat up the water. Only the best shops in the largest village carry produce some of the time. There are no lights. Relatively few people can afford kerosene. There are only 3 telephones in 5 villages, and they don't always work. But volunteers, if they have the right kind of cell phone plan, can talk in the bush on their cell phone. This guy was arranging for somebody to pick him up and take him to the airport when he got to Nairobi. But I tried to use a phone a few times, and maybe 3 out of 5 times. There are no power tools, no washers and dryers, no kitchens, no pantries. The few people who have jobs cook over charcoal. Most people gather wood. So the bush is being denuded in this part of the country, both to make charcoal, which isn't really illegal, but it's not really, it's frowned upon. And also because people who aren't using charcoal are using wood. It takes a long time to cook rice and beans on a wood fire, and people do it every single day. The only gas burner is in the banda, in the volunteers' banda. So the women in the village really like cooking there. This was my birthday. In Kasigal, when it's your birthday, you have to throw the party. You have to pay for the meat and send somebody to go get it and all that, make the cake. I found that out a little late in the game. Most houses are very basic. This is the inside of someone's front door. Only the volunteers' banda had separate rooms for sleeping and then another room for cooking, sitting, that sort of thing. The banda also had a sink. This was our sink, and one of the few sinks in town, because remember, aside from us, there was no running water. Ours came, we were a little way up the mountain, so our water came right from the mountain, but only because we were special guests in the village. We also had a shower right there. And right next door in the same little building, which was quite a ways away from the banda, the only toilet in the village that you sat on. The rest of them are like Asian toilets. And I wasn't going to take a picture of that. So this is the potty gecko, we called him, which was good because geckos do not like snakes. So when there was a gecko in the potty, that was good because that meant there weren't any snakes around. I never saw that many snakes, you guys who are thinking of going with me. Okay. Imagine that in a place where malaria is rampant, only volunteers have mosquito nets on their beds because everybody else is either sharing a bed where people are coming and going too many different times to matter, or they don't have beds. Lots of kids, when they get old enough and there are more younger kids to sleep in the family bed, then they don't sleep in a bed. This boy, he has malaria. This one too. These girls have all had malaria. And once you get it, I don't think it ever goes away. It just goes into remission and comes back. This woman has tuberculosis that's been very resistant. She had it when I was there, and she's still trying to get it treated adequately so that it goes away. Imagine that severe chronic illness is a fact of life for young children, and that the only real hospital, the nearest real hospital, is halfway to Nairobi. So that's about 3 hours away. There's a clinic, but it's between a half an hour and a half walk from all the other villages. So people don't even think of the clinic until they get really sick, and when they're really sick, they're not going to be walking an hour and a half. Imagine a place where the animals are incredibly scary, especially if you're a young child, even if they only look that way. I'm sad about this because this is the part I had the really better pictures. And dangerous too. This is from my first trip. See, he has a radio collar. That's how we followed him around, and his whole pride. But animals in Kasigal are really dangerous. Like, this is a crocodile, and they were imported. They're not indigenous there. They came, people brought them in, I think, to keep the baboons out of the water supply. Yeah, it's true. But in the village I was in, there's a community library that was built by the parents of a volunteer who was killed by a crocodile in Lake Chala, which is far away from where you all are going. But it's, as a young child, you have to grow up learning a whole different thing about personal safety. You know, the word for guest is the same as the word for stranger, but you need to learn when an elephant is really going to be dangerous and when they're just goofing around. So elephants come into the villages and destroy the few small gardens that have been irrigated whenever there's a drought. And they march right in just like that. They tear up the pipes that supply the only water to the bush that doesn't come from the mountain. And really these waters are only piped into big water holes, concrete watering places for animals. Imagine knowing that where you live the animals regularly threaten and sometimes kill people who are just trying to protect their own personal supplies of food and water for their families. Imagine growing up in a place where everyone gets used to not having enough to eat. Toddlers and preschoolers seem to do the best during times of drought and famine, because no rain, no crop, no market, no money, no food, no. That's how it goes. But I think toddlers they're big enough compared to babies that they're not growing at that rapid rate, but they haven't reached puberty, so they're not in a growth spurt. And I don't know, people give them food because they're so darn cute. It's true. So they seem to get the food they need, and they look the most healthy to me of all the kids. School-age children fare far worse. They grow very, very slowly or begin to lose weight, which makes it very difficult to learn. Remember, I'm from the College of Ed, so this all goes back to infants, toddlers, school-age kids, that sort of thing. Teenagers often give away their food to their younger siblings, and sometimes it seems like nobody gets enough to eat. Imagine living in a place where you keep eating long after you're full if there's food there, because you don't know when you'll have food again. It's tiring being sick and hungry. There's a lot, kids don't play much when they're sick and hungry. There's a lot of waiting around for food and water. These kids are waiting with their jugs to go home from school and carry water. And some of them probably walk a half an hour, so it's water's heavy to carry a gallon of water when you're in kindergarten. Every now and again, the church has a picnic for the children. All the children in the village, Muslim children, Christian children, Pentecostal children, Church of England children. For many young children, the school lunch is the only predictable meal of the day. This is the kitchen where the school lunches are prepared. They have one big vat in there, and the school lunch is government surplus maize, corn, gruel, so they just pour it in there early in the morning. They have a big wood fire. They cook it until lunchtime, and then they eat it. It's very difficult for the little kids and the kids who are losing their teeth because it doesn't always get cooked really well. So attendance at school and at church is excellent during times of drought. People try to send their 2-year-olds to preschool and all that. I don't know what to do. Ed, should I just keep going or?
Yeah, I think these pictures are so beautiful. Why don't you keep on showing pictures?
How many people have to leave and go to class?
I myself do, but I think a lot of people could stay longer, and perhaps instead of a question session at the end, if there's a question that relates to directly one of the pictures
Okay.
you're showing, someone can
Sure.
interject it right away. I think that would be the best use
Sure.
of time.
Okay, so this place is also Casigao. And those of you who have to leave now, you're going to miss just the detail about school and family. You have both sides of the Casigao story. Okay, so this is where we are, Africa. Kenya's on the east coast of Africa. The mountain Casigao is right about where that red star is, so partway between, about 2/3 of the way from Nairobi to Mombasa on the main road. That green, dark green patch, that's the footprint of the mountain. And these next few slides, they'll just show you little stars around the mountain where the villages are. So this is Kitegi. It's one of the smaller villages, but they have a new preschool. This is Rukanga. It's the largest of the villages. It has the medical clinic, which is open not all the time, but some days, some weeks. They have the shops and the stores and things like that. This is Jora. So from Kitegi to Rukanga, it's about an hour and a half walk. I had a heat stroke at that walk. And then from Rukanga to Jora, it's about an hour. The next village is where we live. That's Bunguli. And that's about 30 minutes. And then the last village is called Makwasini. And the other 4 villages are on the road. You can see the road that comes down and around. But Makwasini is not on a road, so you walk there sort of across the saddle of the mountain. I got to do the first 4 villages on the road. I walked that on my birthday. It was my best birthday ever. That's why I didn't know about the cake and all that. Okay, so imagine growing up in a place where family has a very flexible kind of meaning depending who's living with you in your house. So this is a common family group composed of the parents, their 4 biological children, and 2 cousins who are orphaned, most likely by AIDS, but a lot of people in Kasigao, when I was doing my interviews, they just say they don't believe in AIDS, which I think kind of means they don't want to know about it, but I'm not sure what it means. There are nuclear families with only 1 child. These are usually younger families where both mothers care for children and fathers. It's very common for nuclear families to share a family compound. So these 2 men are, and those are their children. The guy on the left has another child now. At the time, they each had 1 child. But they lived in a family compound with their wives, I think 1 sister, 1 brother, and their dad. And their mom was deceased. So this is another person from the same family. There are single mothers with half siblings. So these children are all siblings, and the woman is their mother. They have different fathers. And these are the brothers from in between. So sometimes they cross a wide range of ages. I mean, you can tell she's not that old, and she has 5 or 6 kids. And the oldest one's 20, and the youngest one's a baby. It's hard to tell sometimes who's an older sibling and who's a parent. There are many families where unrelated adults live in the same house. And there are many, many, many families where fathers, brothers, older brothers, uncles are working in Mombasa or Nairobi, and the family lives in Kasigao. So in this place, the village really does raise each child. These people are totally unrelated, but they're both from the Taita tribal group, and so John there, he's getting a lesson, a history lesson, oral history lesson, but he's writing it down because he's hoping to go to high school at that point. These people, the older boy, everybody calls him uncle. All the kids. I don't know if they're related, but they're not all related, and they all call each other sister and brother. It's kind of a generational thing. So it's hard to tell. It's a little bit like the Native American family structures where it's hard to tell by the words they use to name their relatives who's actually related to whom. They all seem like they're related. Young infants are almost always with their mothers. They're fed on demand. They're carried in a sling on their mother's back until they're too heavy to carry, or they'd be too heavy for me to carry, but until they're big enough that they can cover the distance they need to cover quickly. So this ensures really close physical contact for the first couple of years, but it's nothing like we teach in this country and in the Western countries about what makes for good parenting. You know, a lot of face-to-face interaction and talking to your child and describing what's going on. They don't talk to their children until their children can talk back. So when mothers are busy with household tasks and they're not caring for children, usually an older sibling is caring for that child. And it might be a sibling who's a little bit older, only a little bit older, or who's a few years older, or who's a lot older. And they aren't always related. These two are, but the previous photo, they weren't necessarily related. In most of the photos I took of children in Kasigao, they were caring for younger brothers and sisters or sometimes neighbors. It's expected. Okay, this is good. So these are some of the conclusions I came to when I was analyzing the questionnaires that I asked. I asked questions of parents, of teachers, of elders, and of kids around things like child development, children with special needs, preschool, all sorts of things. So these are a few of the things I learned, that there are very few constants when it comes to child development. Now, I teach child development variations, so for kids with special needs. And I think, you know, we have a whole raft of assessment instruments and ways to make children eligible that are kind of based in assumptions that don't hold up when you go to a place like Kasigao. So the culture is a really powerful determinant of what children know and what they're able to do. A 5-year-old could care for their 2-year-old sibling all day out in the bush where I'd be lost in 10 minutes and probably thirst to death. This doesn't all apply to today because I'm not using the presentation I really put together for today because of our technical difficulties. So, for example, babies in Kasigao, they don't start to walk until they're too big to carry. They're plenty old enough to walk, and as soon as they put them down, they figure out how to walk in about 3 days. But, you know, we worry in this country if a child's not walking by the time they're 16 months old, it's a big red flag for people to look at their motor development. And then the thing about face-to-face interactions, they watch, they listen, and all that. Okay, thanks, Ed. Okay. So I put this assessments because last time I did this, I did it at a conference for special educators. But you know, the way we look at child development, what's normal and what's typical and all that, we don't have a way to account for or give kids credit for the fact that these children are trilingual by the time they're in first grade. Their home language is Taita. They start learning English and Swahili when they're in preschool. By the time they get to first grade, they're taught some subjects in English and some in Swahili, none in Taita. I learned Swahili before I went there, and everybody in the village wanted me to talk Taita. They speak Swahili to people who speak other languages, other East African languages. So about school. There's a national curriculum in Kenya. So these second graders at any given day, they should be learning the same thing that all the other second graders in Kenya are learning in the same subjects. They have 13 examinable subjects. There's a little bit of running around and active play right after lunch. But other than that, it's a fairly quiet, sedentary place. People just don't have the energy. They don't drink or eat in the morning because they don't want to wake their stomachs up. They eat at lunchtime. There's a couple hours where people are really productive, and then it's evening. So there aren't any toys. I only saw one toy and I didn't have my camera, and it was a car that a kid had fashioned from sticks, tying sticks together. It was awesome. It's one of those photos I never took, but I wish I had. So there's a lot of just hanging out, talking, usually boys with boys and girls with girls. Kids go to the library. If they're lucky enough to live in Bungule, they go to the community library and check out books. This is Doreen. Oh, okay, after Doreen, before Doreen. So I replicated a study that was done a number of years ago in different countries, asking children what constitutes good behavior, essentially, for children in Sweden, in Kenya, and different countries. So I did an interview with kids different ages, and I asked them, what do good children do, or what is good behavior for children? And this is what they answered, and there was very little, if you look at the actual data, there is very little deviation from this. It wasn't even worth putting it up there. So they say you're helpful, you help with the work, you're respectful of your elders, you're well behaved, and you study hard and do well in school. So this is Doreen. She helps cook. Every day she carries water home from school, and she cares for her siblings, her younger siblings. John in the doorway on the right, he helps his mom Esther because she's sick quite a bit. He walks to Rukanga to get government surplus food, rice and beans, 30, 40 pounds at a shot. He gathers firewood, he does the laundry. He's a very helpful guy, and he's actually just about to graduate from high school. Eliud on the left, he works as a matatu conductor, and he brings his money home and gives it to his mom, and she has a little kiosk. She buys drinks and sells them, mostly to the volunteers. And he also supports his nieces and nephews to go to preschool. There is very little misbehavior in Kenya. I took a lot of pictures in church. I never once heard a child, no matter how young, had to be scolded or corrected or reminded what the appropriate behavior was for church. And there weren't adults in there. I was in the back taking photos, and everybody else was in the front. Study hard and be a good student was one of the 4 most common responses, but it was lower on the list of priorities than helping, being respectful, and being well behaved.
How does that differ from answers in other countries?
Well, I only did it here, but in the original study, the countries like Sweden, much less emphasis on helping, much less emphasis actually on being respectful. There's very little overlap. Study hard and do well in school was one of the places where it overlapped. Good question. So it seems like values for hard work and good behavior would make for model students. I mean, I know over in the College of Ed, those are the kind of students we like to see, self-motivated and all that. So I was really interested in why studying and doing well was last on the list for the top responses. And after that, the 5th response was way down there. And usually it was something like be a good sister, be a good role model, find a job, make some money for your family. So these children are actually in the community library and the schools. Those are all supplies we took with us. The schools don't have that much supplies. These girls were all in the 8th grade, and they are all really good students. They all did well on the national exams, but oftentimes they don't go to school. They have to stay home to gather firewood, to take care of their younger siblings who aren't old enough to go to school, to work on the farm and things like that. and it gets dark early, and there's no electricity, so it's hard for people to study if they have to walk for a half hour to get home and then help with the gathering the wood and making the dinner, and then it's dark, so there's not much studying once kids get home.
Is there no daylight savings time in summer?
You know, they're almost right on the equator.
Right.
And I've been there in January and August, but I don't know if there's daylight savings time or not. It's pretty much 6 to 6, 7 to 7. That's how it goes. So about school, the people where I was, they really consider public education to be a privilege. Special education, as we know it, is a luxury. So kids are either, they go to local schools, they don't go to school at all, or if their parents have a lot of money, they can send them to a boarding school in Mombasa or Nairobi. But that's not any of the families where I was. The other thing I learned was that our whole big thing about standards-based education and outcome-oriented assessments and things like that, that's a relatively new thing in our country. It's been going on in Kenya forever. And even in the Bush schools, they have a national curriculum, they have an approved list of textbooks, they have a scope and sequence that's nationwide. They're tested at the end of every year. So that was kind of... Then the other thing that was of most interest to me was about preschool. So, well, I'll keep going with this. So the Kenyan government, I said this in the introduction, funds grades 1 through 8. This is the only sign in Bunguli. It's for the school. Each school has a distinctive uniform with skirts and jumpers, usually for girls, and shorts for boys. But you can see there's kind of a mixing matching going on. Parents have to purchase the uniforms, technically, and they can't always afford it, so there's a lot of handing down and a lot of mixing and matching, and things wear out and it takes a while. So there's a national curriculum. I already talked about that. There's an exam at the end of every year. I was really surprised to find that every single person was very knowledgeable and had strong opinions about preschool. Because in this country, sometimes it's hard to whip up some enthusiasm for preschool. But every single person I asked said that preschool is very important. You know, I had a Likert scale. They all described preschool as a strong foundation. Every one of these 5 villages has 2 preschool classrooms and 2 preschool teachers. This is a new preschool building that a American donor paid for, maybe $1,000, got a whole building. One of the respondents said that preschool children are like new pangas, machetes, and that preschool sharpens them up for the work of primary school. I thought that was really great. Preschool classrooms are not the child-centered active learning environments that we like to think about here. I took care of the preschool, both classes combined, for the first 2 days because the teachers were working with the Standard 1 teachers to transition the older kids from the previous year's preschool. And I mean, those kids, the second year preschoolers, they took turns getting up, and on one wall, well, you can see there they have green square, red circle, blue triangle. And on an adjacent wall, they have the alphabet and the numbers, the English alphabet and the numbers 1 to 20. And those second year students took a turn each getting up there with a long pointer thing and just pointing and saying green square. And then in chorus, they would say green square, red circle, red circle. So by the end of the first day, all the first year kids knew what to say when they pointed to the shapes, the colors, the alphabet, and the numbers to 20. But when I tried to, it's how they learn. You know, when you go to church, that's how they learn their music, and it's how they learn their stories and their history and all that. It's a call and response kind of thing. If you ever go to African American churches, you can tell where it comes from, that and rap music. But when I tried to see, like, could they count? You know, when I put one child under the one and two children under the two, they didn't get that one-to-one counting. And if you tried to separate the colors and the shapes, they would just say, if you showed them any color square, they would say green square. It was really fascinating. They learned it really quickly, and the teachers did too. So school kids, they're very enthusiastic when they're in the primary grades. These are the 10 preschool teachers. Are all teaching in their second and third languages because they're all native Taita speakers. I was quite disappointed with those preschoolers that they didn't know any Swahili, because that was my only ace in the hole. The preschool teachers meet every month, and they rotate from village to village. So 8 of them are walking an average of an hour, hour and a half every time they get together. I really messed up there by starting a meeting without saying a prayer. That was only once, though. This is Faith. She's a preschool teacher, and Suzanne Krog and I, she's another person, she's in elementary ed. We've put Faith through school so she could get certificated to teach early childhood. She was kind of doing it as a volunteer, I think. They're just very dedicated women. They sort of work as volunteers because it costs about $20 a year for kids to go to school, but preschool, but their parents can't often pay it. So they have to pay up before their kids can go to grade 1. So they start school in January, so in January it's like a big Christmas time for preschool teachers because they get paid a lot of back wages. The problems with the schools, really, the biggest problem is that there's hardly any prospects for children to attend school after 8th grade. They take an exit exam. It's a high-stakes exam. If they score high enough, then they're eligible to go to high school. But all the high schools are boarding schools, so they have to pay room and board and tuition. And then the substandard facilities are a continual problem. So this is the primary school in Kategi. It's probably in the best shape because they had some volunteers who did some painting and things like that. Kids share textbooks, 1 book to 3 children in the primary grades, 1 book for 2 children in 4, 5, and 6, and then I think in 7 and 8 they try to give everybody their own books, but they're kind of old books. So very few of these kids will get to go to high school. 3 or 4 of them at most. They had a program where they solicited sponsorships for kids from Kasigao to go to high school, but they're not doing that anymore. So we're supporting 4 kids in high school. And one of them we're hoping to bring back here in the summer to go to community college. I was all about preschool, but this kid, I don't know. Sometimes you don't choose those things, they choose you. So he's really happy because he got a great grade, but at this point he didn't know if he was going to be able to afford to go to school. His mom sent him away in 7th grade to live with an aunt or somebody who could afford to feed him. She was pregnant and he wasn't getting to go to school, so she just knew if she kept him in school, he'd be able to go. So kids who get really high marks on their exit exam are really happy, but it doesn't last very long if there's no sponsorship to send you to school. So you can do really well enough to go to a provincial school, but if they only have 6 sponsorships and you're number 7, then you may as well not do very well. These girls, when I knew them, they had all graduated 8th grade and they're done with school forever. One headmaster told me he feels lucky if kids don't get married and get pregnant when they're in 8th grade, but there really isn't a lot for them to do. It's not a moneyed economy. There's no jobs really. So, yeah. So there's not very much for people to do after they graduate 8th grade. They might go into the bush and cut charcoal, make charcoal, which the community really frowns on, but people have to eat. Eliud, he's the Matatu conductor, but at that point in time he was unemployed. So it's hard for kids, I think, to maintain enthusiasm for studying hard and doing well when they have a lot of responsibilities outside school. So I say all the time to my son, school's your job. That's your job now. When you graduate and you get your job, that'll be your job. Now, school's your job. Nobody says that in Kenya because it's way down the list. This is John. This was his first day of school. High school changes a child's life forever from Kenya. So this was his first pair of shoes. The uniform, this is the smallest uniform they had. He was 14, but he was very tiny because the headmaster in this school told me that in the bush, boys especially, their puberty is delayed because they don't get enough to eat oftentimes. But he said, don't worry about it. By the end of the first semester, he'll be fitting in his uniform. That'll be good. So, and he was right. So the only way people from Kasigao get to go to school is if people like me sponsor them. The high schools are boarding schools, so they take everything. I mean, this is this room right here, this is the boys' dorm. This is a child's dream in Kasigao. I sound like Save the Children or something, but they all have their little metal suitcase, and they have to bring their own mattresses, and there's only one high school in Kasigao, and it's a provincial high school that kids from all over the country come from. This is the campus of Moi High School. The facilities are really basic by our standards. There's very little equipment because there's no electricity, remember. The only electricity there is at the high school is they have some solar that powers computers. And so that's pretty, I mean, it's pretty dicey because it's old. I've heard, somebody told me that they have internet, so I don't know if it's at the high school or somebody's running on a treadmill or how they do it. This is a new science laboratory because the old one burned in a fire, which is kind of close to home for us this week. So this is the inside of the lab. It's brand new, but my dad's a retired chemistry teacher, and he couldn't stand it. He sent them all sorts of, periodic tables, and I don't know what all of it. Parking is not as much a problem as it is on most campuses around here. This is just a picture from the campus. So imagine growing up in a place where parents try to send toddlers to preschool early because of the school lunch. Where first graders can't go to government-funded school if their parents can't pay the back preschool tuition. Where primary school is the only education for most students. What amazed me was how well most kids tried, how hard they tried, at least in the primary grades, to do well and be good students. So imagine growing up in Kasigao. And then, this is Becky. She's the person who went as a student teacher, and some of the photos are hers, so I have to acknowledge her. And also because people just loved her, and she loved everybody, so they really opened up their hearts to us, I think. And then this probably only means anything to the special ed people, the DISTAR. It's in special ed, what's it stand for? Direct instruction something, something about reading, writing, teaching reading, writing, and math to kids who are, have learning disabilities. But this was a restaurant, it was an Indian restaurant. But we put Becky and the preschool teacher there and said we were going to start our own Distar Center. So that's it.